Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The sun baked the desert in waves of liquid heat, rising off the ground like ghosts at Sierra Run, the elite testing facility tucked into 50 square miles of barren, unforgiving sand. 12. Personnel stood clustered in the shadow of a cutting-edge mobile command truck. Recruits, instructors, officers, and one quiet woman with a clipboard. No one made room for her. Not one. Private Kayla Monroe didn't speak. She just held the experimental XM-27 long-shot sniper rifle. As ordered, like a glorified equipment stand, while Sergeant Miller strutted around the firing line, acting like he owned the entire base. This scope costs more than your whole career, he had barked at her earlier. So just stand there and don't touch anything, sweetheart. The men had chuckled. But what they didn't know was this. That rifle was about to change everything. Not just for the program, not just for the military, but for every single person who had underestimated the woman holding it. Kayla Monroe never asked for recognition. She never demanded respect. She just came from a place where the wind teaches you to listen before you shoot, where your father wakes you up before dawn, hands you a rifle, and says, "If you miss, we don't eat." Montana built her that way. She wasn't raised for compliments. She was raised for precision by 12. She was hitting moving deer from distances that made experienced hunters whistle through their teeth. Her bedroom walls weren't covered in pop stars or prom pictures. They were plastered with shooting ribbons, tournament medals, and hand-scrawled notes of bullet drop calculations. "Daddy, I hit 800 yards today," she used to say at the dinner table. Her mother would shake her head with a smile. Her father, a retired Army Ranger, would nod with pride. "That's my girl." Basic training had been simple, while others missed their mark at 100 yards. Kayla drilled holes in targets like she was threading needles in midair. It wasn't luck, it was lineage, it was work, it was instinct. But none of that mattered today at Sierra Run, because today she was told to hold the gun, not fire it. Captain Roberts had outlined the mission. The XM-27 was a $40 million prototype. Its targeting systems were state-of-the-art, computer-assisted scopes, gyroscopic stabilization, atmospheric sensors. It could supposedly land shots at nearly 3,000 meters. But there was a problem. Beyond 2,500 meters, no one could make it work. Not even Sergeant Miller, a 15-year Special Forces veteran with a chest full of campaign ribbons and an ego twice as long as the desert runway. He kept missing, first at 2,250 meters, then again. Mirage is killing the algorithm. He growled. "The heat's messing with the scope." Kayla watched in silence. Fingers gently curled around the weapon's grip, observing the dust devils, the sun ripples, the oscillating flag tips. She didn't need a scope to tell her what the wind was doing. She could see it, the way her father taught her, in the grass, in the light, in the shimmer. And when Miller handed her the rifle during a break, shoved it into her arms. Really, something shifted. Her thumb instinctively traced the balance point. Her eye found the offset in the scope's compensation wheel. She adjusted nothing. She just noticed. "What are you doing?" Miller snapped, catching her hand near the dials. "Nothing, Sergeant. Just holding it as instructed." He scoffed loudly. "You think you could do better?" Kayla didn't answer, but something in her stillness made the other men turn and, "Look, you've been giving me that look all day, like you know something we don't. Enlighten us, Private. What's your grand insight?" Captain Roberts started to intervene, but Miller pressed. Kayla's voice was low but even. "You're fighting the computer, sir. The scope's adjusting based on your manual inputs, but your adjustments in the software are canceling each other out. You're being miscalculated twice." The silence was a thunderclap. Miller's laugh was acid. 15 years of confirmed kills, and now I'm getting advice from a supply clerk with lip gloss. You think because Daddy taught you to shoot Bambi you know better than us? She didn't flinch. No, Sergeant. You were just forgetting your place. He said it in front of everyone. He wanted the sting to stick, and it did. But not in the way he intended. Kayla said nothing. She swallowed the insult. Like a bitter pill, eyes drifting back to the target at 2,950 meters. Still untouched, still undefeated, she watched the way the wind whipped and paused. She studied the light bending in a slow corkscrew across the valley floor. She calculated. Barometric drop and Coriolis deflection in her head. Like second nature, she didn't need validation. She needed one shot. When Sergeant Miller missed for the final time, cursing, slamming the bolt forward, Captain Roberts gave the word. That's it. Pack it in. We'll recalibrate tomorrow. Duh. Techs began to break down the gear. No one had hit target 7 Alpha. The heat had won. The wind had won. And yet, Kayla stepped forward. Sir, she said, request permission to take one shot. Miller turned, jaw slack. You're kidding. Captain Roberts hesitated. Private, this isn't a joke. One shot, she repeated. If I miss, I'll accept disciplinary action for wasting time and ammo. The technicians glanced at each other. From a research perspective, one said quietly, we could use the data. Captain Roberts folded his arms. Fine. One shot, private. Make it. Count. Everyone watched. Miller folded his arms, smug. She approached the firing line like it was sacred ground. Kayla didn't rush. She observed the valley, held her hand to the wind, noted the dust devils, watched the mirage, read the mountain shadows like a language only she spoke. Then she disabled the entire computer system. What is she doing? One tech whispered, she's going manual. Another answered, old school. Kayla lay prone. Slow breath in, slow exhale, wind from the southwest. Spiraling thermal shifts every 45 seconds. Mirage spiraling clockwise, indicative of rising. Warm air rebounding between slopes. She waited again. Then, breath half held, trigger squeezed. The shot cracked like a thunderbolt. 3 seconds of silence. Then, a puff of dust, dead center. 2,950 meters. Target hit. Confirmed. The range computer beeped. The technicians froze. One dropped his clipboard. Captain Roberts said nothing. Just stared. Kayla stood up, safed the weapon, and looked straight ahead. How? How did you do that? The captain finally asked. I just read the wind, she said. Behind her, Miller had gone pale. His mouth opened, then shut. The men who had laughed hours ago now stared at her with something different in their eyes. Awe, respect, fear. And that was only the beginning. Why was a colonel now walking toward her lunch table? The mess hall buzzed with background noise. Trays clattered, boots scuffed tile, laughter rose in bursts. But at Kayla's table, it was silent. She sat alone. Again, except today. There were whispers, eyes, murmurs trailing behind her like ghosts. And then Captain Roberts returned, not alone this time. A tall, stone-faced man with silver hair and eagle eyes followed beside him. Dressed not in desert fatigues, but command blues. The kind of uniform that made rooms fall quiet. Kayla set her fork down. Private Monroe, the captain said formally. This is Colonel Vagner, Director of Advanced Weapons Development. Kayla shot up. Sir! At ease, Private, Vagner said, eyes scanning her like she was a schematic he was trying to solve. Mind if we join you? She nodded. They sat. The colonel placed a folder on the table, unmarked, thick. I've reviewed the data from yesterday, and the video footage, and the scope logs. I've spoken to every tech and every witness, he said without preamble. So let me ask you something plainly. He leaned in. Was that shot luck, Private Monroe? Kayla didn't blink. No, sir. Could you do it again? Yes, sir. Given similar conditions. Vagner nodded. Slowly. The standing record was 2,800 meters. You broke it. with no computer assistance on your first attempt. She stayed quiet. The last man to even attempt that was a 3-tour combat vet and Olympic trial shooter, Monroe. He tapped the folder. This is a performance that rewrites doctrine. And I'm still not sure how. But before she could answer, the commotion at the entrance drew all eyes. Sergeant Miller. He hadn't spoken to her since yesterday. Hadn't looked her way since she'd walked off the range and erased his credibility in a single breath. Now he marched through the room, chest puffed, lips tight, a man not defeated but plotting. He approached their table without asking. "Sir," he barked, ignoring Kayla completely. "I've prepared a formal report on yesterday's irregularities." Vagner looked up slowly. "Have you now?" "Yes, sir." The unauthorized firing of experimental hardware by unqualified personnel is a serious breach of testing protocol. Captain Roberts tensed. Kayla felt her stomach drop. She acted against direct orders, Miller added. Undermined chain of command, endangered the integrity of our data. Endangered your pride, you mean? Captain Roberts muttered. Vagner didn't look at Miller. He looked at Kayla. "She acted with permission," he said. "Under your command?" "She did," Roberts confirmed. "I approved her attempt. I stand by it." Miller's face twitched. "With respect, this sets a dangerous precedent, rewarding insubordination because it got lucky." "Sergeant," Wagner stood now, slowly, "do you know why I flew here at 0400 this morning?" Miller blinked. "Because Private Monroe accomplished what your entire team could not. She made a shot the system wasn't designed to make. She proved your contempt for her wasn't just inappropriate. It was wrong. Around them, the entire mess hall had gone silent. And she did it while being humiliated by you in front of every observer present." Miller's ears burned red, his fists clenched. "You want to talk about protocol?" Wagner snapped. "Let's talk about what the cameras recorded yesterday. Let's talk about your conduct code violations and how they'll look in a court-martial review." Miller's words caught in his throat. "Report to my office at 0900. Wagner ordered. "We'll discuss your future there." Dismissed. The sergeant didn't move at first, but then, rigid, trembling, he saluted, spun, and walked away. And just like that, Kayla's silence became a roar. The conference room held 6 officers, civilian and military. One wore a suit, not a uniform. All had read her file. They didn't see a girl with a clipboard now. They saw something else entirely. Kayla sat straight-backed, steady, as they asked their questions about wind rivers, about thermal inversion, about how she'd read patterns the computers couldn't. A female analyst named Dr. Shepard was first to connect the dots. "This isn't an outlier," she said, tapping her tablet. "Her test scores are consistent. Top percentile, always. This isn't luck. This is talent the system isn't designed to recognize." Kayla spoke when asked. She explained how she'd learned to shoot on mountain ridgelines where the wind didn't. Obey charts, where you learned or you went hungry, where light didn't just shimmer, it bent, spiraled, danced like a current. She wasn't describing theory. She was describing survival. The room shifted. Then came the interruption. The door burst open. Sergeant Miller, again, flushed, breathless, and defiant. "I need to speak," he barked, ignoring Kayla and facing the officers. "This is a disciplinary issue." "Sergeant." General Harkins, the most senior officer in the room, raised his hand calmly. "This is a closed meeting. I know, but I can't stand by while this private is turned into some legend based on one shot." The air changed. The tension snapped tight. She disobeyed orders. Miller continued. "And now she's being treated like some prodigy? She's a supply clerk. She made a lucky shot. You're making a mistake." "No." "Dear," Shepard said coldly. "You made one." She rose from her seat. "You dismissed skill because it didn't look the way you expected. You mocked it. You insulted it, and now it terrifies you. Miller turned red. She got lucky. No, came a voice from the back. Colonel Vagner had entered without a sound. She outshot you, outthought you, and outclassed you. And if you're threatened by that, Sergeant, I suggest you file for early retirement. Miller looked at Kayla one last time, eyes burning, then turned and left. This time, there was no salute, just silence. That evening, Kayla was packing her gear when her phone buzzed. A message from Sierra Run, from her old bunkmate. Thought you'd want to know. Miller's been reassigned. Equipment inventory, Fort Irwin. Guess they need him to count bullets instead of missing. With them, attached was a video. A going-away party. They handed Miller a mug, zoomed in. It read, outshot by a girl. Kayla chuckled, softly. Justice doesn't always come with ceremony. Sometimes it comes in ceramic, and that was before the next. Mission came knocking. Why was the Army's top sniper unit waiting for her at the gate? Fort Benning shimmered in the Georgia heat, thick and humid like a wet coat. As the military transport plane's ramp hissed open, Kayla Monroe stepped down onto the tarmac with a duffel in one hand and a calm face that betrayed nothing. She was here on orders, but not just any orders. The Army Marksmanship Unit, AMU, the elite of the elite, Olympic-level shooters, tactical wizards, precision incarnate, and now her new team? A staff sergeant stood near a plain SUV, holding a clipboard with her name, Private Monroe? Sergeant Wilson, sir. Let's get you to the compound. Word of your Sierra Run shot beat you here. As they drove, he glanced at her in the mirror. 2,950 meters. No assist. First try. That true? Kayla nodded once. Yes, Sergeant. He whistled low. You're walking into a hornet's nest. These guys don't like being outshot, especially by a woman. I'm used to that. She replied quietly when they pulled up to AMU headquarters. Every eye turned toward her. Dozens of shooters stood clustered outside the long-range building, their arms crossed, faces blank, curiosity barely masking the tension. Inside, the air was cooler, but no more welcoming. Colonel Davis, a lean man with sharp eyes, sat at the head of a table flanked by Major Peterson and Captain Grant, the leaders of the unit's long-range division. They didn't waste time. Your shot. As Sierra Run raised some questions, Davis began. Kayla said nothing. Some say it was impossible. Others say it was a fluke. What do you say? I say I can do it again, sir. Captain Grant leaned forward, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. You're bold. I like that. How about a little demonstration this afternoon? I'm ready now, sir. 2 hours later, the AMUs. Long-range range was packed. Word had spread. The girl from Sierra Run was here. The one with the miracle shot. The one some were calling one-shot Monroe behind her back. Today, she would go head-to-head with Staff Sergeant Brooks, AMU's current champion. 5 shots each at 1,500 meters. Best grouping wins. Brooks stood tall, confident. A brick of muscle and steel. He nodded at her with a smirk. Ladies first, he said. Mock chivalrous. Kayla ignored him, settled behind the M110 rifle. Her breathing slowed. The breeze was inconsistent, slanting, curling between the trees at the edge of the range. She watched the grass, the leaf tremors, the shimmer. Then 5 shots, crisp, controlled, within a 2-inch group. When she stood, the murmurs started. Brooks took position, focused. First 4 shots. Perfect. Then came the 5th, a sudden gust. He hesitated, readjusted, fired. The round drifted just. Outside his group, Private Monroe wins, Major Peterson announced. Surprised, Brooks looked at the target, then at her. That win came out of nowhere, he muttered. Kayla's voice was even. The leaves were moving 30 seconds before it. Hit the range, east tree line. Brooks turned, squinted, and then respect dawned. You saw that from here. Situational awareness, she said. My father taught me to read the edges. Not just the middle. He stepped forward, extended a hand. Your father must have been one hell of a shooter. He was. There was a pause. Tim Monroe? Brooks asked. Fallujah? 1,100 meters through crosswind that grounded helicopters? Kayla blinked. You knew him? He was a legend, Brooks said. Didn't make the connection until now. And just like that, the whispers changed. She wasn't just a girl. With the miracle shot, she was the daughter of a legend. And she had just proved she wasn't writing his name. She was writing her own. The next 7 days were a trial by fire. 20 of the Army's best shooters. 3 open spots on AM used precision team. Grueling qualification events. Each more brutal than the last. Shooting after sprinting a half mile. Firing from unstable platforms under simulated chaos. Adjusting for impossible wind and minimal time. Every day, someone broke. Every day, someone quit. Every day, Kayla remained. By the final day, only 5 remained, including Brooks, 2 senior shooters with rows of ribbons. And her. Then came the final test. Colonel Davis stood before them. Hands behind his back. Extreme range precision, he said. 2,200 meters, 1 shot. Combat conditions. You run the half-mile course, reach the position, and fire within 30 seconds. Brooks leaned in beside her as they walked. They designed this one for you, he said. They want to know if Sierra Run was lightning. Or if you're the storm. Kayla didn't respond. She was already focused, already calculating. When her turn came, she ran the course like a machine. Lungs burning, knees churning, and dropped prone at the firing line. 28 seconds, she inhaled. The trees whispered. The sun shimmered. The earth paused. And then, breath held, trigger squeezed. Recoil. Hit confirmed. Cheers erupted behind her. Brooks whistled. Well, Al, he said. You are the storm. Colonel Davis walked up, smiling. Congratulations, Private Monroe. Or should I say Specialist Monroe? Your promotion paperwork is already processed. The applause that followed wasn't hesitant. It was earned that night. As she packed her new MU-issued gear into her locker, her phone buzzed. Message from Sierra Run. Captain Roberts. Thought. You'd appreciate the update. Sergeant Miller has officially been reassigned to equipment inventory at Fort Irwin. His expertise is now focused on counting bullets. His going-away party got creative. A photo loaded Miller, scowling, holding a novelty mug. The text. Outshot by a girl. Kayla stared at it, then smiled. Not with triumph, but with quiet, grounded peace. Justice doesn't shout. It just lands the shot. Why was Joint Special Operations Command knocking on her door? 6 months had passed in a blur of drills, matches, and classified evaluations. Specialist Kayla Monroe had become more than just a new name on the roster at the Army Marksmanship Unit. She was the name. At internal competitions, she didn't just place. She rewrote expectations. Her ability to read terrain, decipher wind, and adjust for invisible factors turned her into a ghost on the range. Impossible to predict. Harder to beat, but none of that prepared her for the knock on Colonel Davis's office door. She had been summoned, and inside, waiting beside the colonel, were 2 civilians in suits who didn't look like civilians at all. Their eyes were too sharp, their silence too heavy. Specialist Monroe reporting as ordered, sir. Davis nodded. At ease. These gentlemen are from JSOC. Her pulse stilled. JSOC. Joint Special Operations Command. The shadow side of precision work. The ones who didn't publish rosters or give medals. Just folded flags and stories no one was allowed to tell. The older man stepped forward. Richard Keller. This is my colleague, Mark Dawson. We've been following your progress closely. Kayla shook their hands. We're assembling a team for a highly classified operation. Keller said, We're looking for a long-range precision shooter with skills that go beyond what our current systems can calculate. He slid a folder across the desk. Operation Mountain Shadow Target Alexander Volkov Role. Extreme long-range precision. Elimination conditions. High-altitude terrain. Variable wind. Short intel window distance. Approx. 2,850 meters status. Real world. High risk. Non-training. Kayla skimmed it. Half the page was redacted. The other half made her jaw tense. "This is real," she said softly. Dawson nodded. "This isn't AMU competition. This is deployment." Colonel Davis leaned forward. "Your place at AMU is secure either way. This is voluntary, Monroe. No penalty if you say no." She didn't hesitate. "When do I leave?" Keller didn't smile. "Now, within 24 hours. Kayla was aboard a dark gray military transport, headed toward a classified location. 6 men sat around her, quiet, focused, built like stone. They didn't ask questions. They watched, assessed. She was the only woman on board. And none of them seemed thrilled about it. Captain Harris, the team leader, stood mid-flight and addressed the cabin. "Our target is Alexander Volkov," he said. "High-level arms dealer. Untouchable, hidden in a fortified mountain compound. Previous attempts have failed. Our solution: one shot from the outside, no breach, no war." He pointed at a topographic map. "Firing position will be here minus 2,850 meters away. Line of sight, but unpredictable winds. High altitude pressure, spiraling terrain currents. One chance." He looked at her directly. "That's where Specialist Monroe comes in." The team sniper, Master Sergeant Wheeler, raised an eyebrow. "With all due respect, sir. Controlled testing is one thing. Combat deployment's another. Has she even been tested under fire?" Kayla met his eyes. "Yes, just not in your way. Care to explain?" "My father was recon. Every shooting lesson was conducted like a mission. Up before dawn, hiking miles, cold fingers, no excuses. If I missed, we didn't eat." Wheeler stared, as if weighing something deeper than her words. "Fair enough," he finally said. "But this mission is going to break everyone. 60-hour insertion hike, high elevation, low oxygen, hostile territory. I grew up in Montana backcountry," she said. "I've spent more nights under stars than under roofs." Captain Harris nodded. "She wouldn't be here if we weren't sure." And with that, the silence returned, respect, once withheld, now quietly growing 3 days later. The team was belly crawling along a frozen outcrop overlooking a valley. Below, nestled in stone and snow, was the Volkov compound, high walls, roving guards, no visible weakness. Exactly 2,850 meters away, just beyond what most systems could compute. Just inside Kayla's range, Wheeler scanned with optics. "Wind's going to be your enemy here," he muttered. "It swirls off that south ridge, punches through the valley, rebounds along the west face." Kayla studied the tree line, then the snowdrifts, then the heat shimmer rising subtly off a rock face. Her voice was calm. "It's cycling in 3 parts. North rebound, east slope push, center compression." Wheeler looked again, then blinked. "Son of a..." "You're right." He stared at her. "Your father taught you well." She nodded. "This is Helena Valley all over again." Time passed. The sun moved. Intel confirmed Volkov was inside, preparing for a secure video call in 17 minutes. That would be their window. The office had bulletproof glass, but Kayla had already noticed the seam. "East window has a structural weakness. If he stands in front of the join line, I can get through." Wheeler looked again. "Jesus, you've got eyes like a hawk." "Just get me the wind red," she whispered, checking her rifle, MK22, custom-loaded round, modified scope, no computer assist. Manual, like always, at exactly 17 meds. Volkov stepped into view. He waved the guards away, stood in front of the window, right where she needed him. Wheeler's voice whispered over comms. Wind, 12 knots. Northwest to northeast cycle, peaks. Every 40 seconds. Kayla adjusted, waited. The valley held its breath. She watched the flags. The shimmer, the long, slow bending of invisible air across snow and stone. Then, everything aligned. Trigger squeeze, recoil, time slowed, a blink. Then, impact, Volkov dropped. Right through the seam. Clean final, Wheeler exhaled. Target down. Confirmed kill. Harris echoed over the radio. Prep for exfil, 15. Ms. Wheeler placed a hand on her shoulder as they packed. That shot, he said, eyes still wide. That wasn't just a hit. That was art. She said nothing, because it didn't feel like glory. It felt like gravity, like silence after. Thunder, like her father's voice in her head, whispering, breathe, squeeze, follow through. Why was the president watching her promotion? 3 days after Operation Mountain Shadow, Kayla stood once again inside Colonel Davis's office at Fort Benning. But this time, the room felt different, heavier, quieter, like it had absorbed the gravity of what had just happened overseas. Across from her sat Richard Keller, the same JSOC operative who had recruited her. A thick folder lay open in front of him, stamped with a bold red classification code. Operation Mountain Shadow was a total success, he said without preamble. 1 shot, 1 confirmed elimination. No collateral, cleanest resolution we've seen in 5 years. Colonel Davis, seated beside him, gave a rare smile. What he means, Davis added, is that you've impressed some very powerful people, Specialist Monroe. Keller closed the folder and slid another across the desk. This one wasn't marked mission brief. This one was an offer. A permanent slot with Task Force Sierra, full clearance. Operational deployments with the highest level precision teams in the world. Kayla flipped the folder open. Transfer papers, security upgrades, training rotations, all signed, and 1 line that made her breath catch. Promotion approved. Sergeant Kayla Monroe. You've earned it. Keller said, what you did up there wasn't just difficult. It was statistically near impossible. Kayla didn't answer right away. Her hands were steady, her heart quieter than she expected, because she wasn't surprised. Not anymore. She had spent too long carrying her father's legacy on her back like a rucksack filled with silence and skill. Now she was creating her own. As she left the office, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Staff Sergeant Brooks stood waiting, arms crossed, grinning like a brother in arms. Heard you were back, he said. Also heard a whisper about some impossible mountain shot that knocked an arms dealer off the map. She gave him a dry smile. You believe everything you hear? Only the impressive parts. He nodded to the folder. Task Force Sierra? Kayla didn't answer, but she didn't need to. The seal on the front said enough. You're moving up fast, Monroe, he said, extending a hand. Your father would have been proud. They shook hands, and as they did, something shifted. Not just between them, but in the air around her. Kayla wasn't chasing footsteps anymore. She was walking in her own boots. 1 year later, Fort Bragg. Classroom 3, Advanced Sniper School. 30 operators sat in silence. Marines, SEALs, Green Berets, watching the woman at the front of the room diagram wind patterns on a digital display. Kayla, now Sergeant Kayla Monroe, had just concluded her seminar on thermal spirals and wind rivers. The complex cross-layer airflows she'd learned to see in childhood. Any other instructor would have been challenged, debated, but not her, because the room knew what she had done, because some of them had tried to do it and failed. A grizzled SEAL in the back raised his hand. With all due respect, Sergeant, what you're describing sounds impossible. You're talking about reading invisible temperature layers with your eyes. Kayla nodded, calm. That's what I thought too, until I realized you can't see heat, but you can see how heat moves. Everything else, dust, light, branches, shadows, If you learn to read what the wind touches, you don't need to see the wind itself. Before he could reply, the classroom door opened. The entire room snapped to attention. General Mitchell, the commander of Joint Special Operations Command, walked in, quiet and observant. "As you were," he said. Stepping beside her, he turned to the class. "You're lucky," he said, gesturing to Kayla. "What she's teaching isn't in a manual because no one else can do it." The room stayed frozen 3 times in the last year. "She completed shots our computer models deemed impossible," he continued. "That's why this curriculum is now mandatory. Learn it, study it, because it works." Then he turned to Kayla. "I just stopped in to deliver a message." He waited until the room went silent again. "The president is watching, and he's impressed." After class, Kayla walked beside General Mitchell down the long corridor lined with black and white portraits of past instructors. "Your performance has sparked a discussion," he said. "Not just in special operations in Washington." She said nothing. Mitchell glanced at her. "You've redefined what's possible in long-range precision warfare. And more importantly, what it looks like." They reached a window overlooking the training grounds. Below, young recruits ran through obstacle drills. "Next month, we're hosting the International Special Operations Competition, British SAS. Australian Sasser, Israeli Makol, the best of the best." He turned to her. "The president wants you to represent the United States." Kayla blinked. "Me?" "Yes, not just for the skill, for what you represent." Before she could answer, his aide approached. "Urgent call from CENTCOM, sir." Mitchell stepped aside, took the call, his expression tightening. When he returned, his tone was different. "Plans changed. You're airborne in 60 minutes. Highest level clearance. I can't give details here." "I understand, sir," Kayla said. But before she turned to leave, her phone buzzed. A message from an anonymous military account. Attached, a news article from Sierra Run. Former instructor demoted after investigation reveals pattern of gender discrimination. Sergeant Miller. The headline made it clear. He'd been reassigned again, demoted to corporal. His request to return as an instructor had been denied. The article quoted an unnamed senior officer. "The days of judging soldiers by anything other than performance and character are over." Kayla smiled, not with triumph, but with closure. Justice doesn't need an audience. It just needs time. And that time had arrived. Why was a young private crying just to shake her hand? 2 weeks had passed since the mission. Another impossible shot. Another classified deployment. And once again, Sergeant Kayla Monroe had done what the software said couldn't be done. Now, on a clear morning at Fort Bragg, she stood on a raised ceremonial platform. Uniform crisp, boots shined, face composed. Though her heart beat with quiet thunder, General Mitchell stood beside her, pinning new rank insignia onto her chest. Captain, from sniper to soldier, from clipboard to command. Kayla Monroe had just become Captain Monroe. The honor guard saluted. A screen flickered to life nearby, and a secure video feed came online. The President of the United States, smiling warmly, offered a brief address. "Captain Monroe," he said, "your country is proud of you. Not just for what you've accomplished in the field, but for what you represent in our military. A new standard of precision, resilience, and excellence that transcends the boundaries of old thinking." The words echoed like distant thunder. Applause followed, but Kayla barely heard it, because her father's voice, the one etched in memory, whispered louder. "Focus, breathe, lead from the front." The crowd thinned after the ceremony. She made her way down the steps quietly, barely acknowledging the claps or shoulder pats until a voice broke through the buzz. "Captain Monroe?" Kayla turned. A young female private stood there, barely 20. Boots too new, uniform still stiff. Her hands trembled as she held a folded paper. I just wanted to say." Her voice cracked. "You're the reason I am listed, ma'am." Kayla blinked. I saw a story about Sierra Run, about how you made that shot when no one believed you, and I thought, if she can do it, maybe I can too. She held out a printout, a photo of Kayla's historic Sierra Run target confirmation, and a marker. Would you mind? Kayla took the marker, signed her name with a soft, steady hand, then looked the girl in the eye. What's your name? Private. Collins, man. Jennifer Collins. Well, Private Collins, Kayla said. Let me tell you what my father told me when I thought I didn't belong. She paused. The only limitations that matter are the ones you accept. Collins nodded, her eyes wet. I don't accept many, Kayla added with a smile. The young soldier smiled back, a little stronger, a little braver. That was the moment Kayla knew this story wasn't just hers anymore. That night, in the quiet of her quarters, a new message lit up her phone. From Brooks. Subject line: You're not going to believe this. The text was simple. They're renaming the long-distance range at Sierra Run. A photo followed, a freshly painted sign, bold, clear. Timothy Monroe Precision Facility. Kayla froze. Her breath caught in her chest. Her father's name. On the range where it all began, where she had once been laughed at for holding a sniper rifle like a prop, where she had once stood in the dust, invisible. Now, the range itself bore the name of the man who had taught her everything. The man who had turned hunting into a lesson, silence into instruction, and breath control into prayer. She pulled out the small wooden box she kept under her cot, opened it slowly. Inside, one faded photograph. Her and her father on a Montana ridgeline, rifles in hand, matching smirks frozen in time. And beside it, his dog tags, still cool to the touch. She held them gently. We did it, Dad, she whispered. We showed them all, outside. The stars stretched across the night sky like distant signals. The same stars that had once lit the mountain valley where she made the shot that changed everything. The same stars her father had taught her to read when compasses failed. Now, they burned above Fort Bragg, bearing witness to a journey that began with disrespect and ended with legacy, because sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Why were elite operators suddenly listening to every word she said? 3 months after her promotion to captain, Kayla Monroe stood beneath the vaulted ceiling of the Advanced Sniper School briefing hall at Fort Bragg. Around her sat some of the most elite shooters from across the world. Special Forces, Navy SEALs, Delta operators, foreign partners, men who had faced war, survived hell, and led entire teams. But now, they listened to her. No interruptions, no chuckles. No side comments about clipboard holders or lucky wind, because every one of them had seen the footage from Operation Mountain Shadow. They'd read the internal report. 2,850 meters, manual shot, spiral wind pattern, seam penetration through bulletproof glass, 1 round, 0 error. What the algorithm said couldn't be done, she did not once but 3 times, and now her technique, her understanding of wind rivers, thermal bends, microcurrents, was being institutionalized into global sniper training. Kayla stood at the whiteboard, diagramming a triple-layer wind vortex. It's not about the numbers, she said quietly. It's about the rhythm. They leaned in. The way dust flickers, the way leaves lift before they sway. The light distortion you see just before the mirage builds. That's the conversation. The wind doesn't talk in speed. It talks in rhythm. A grizzled Canadian JTF-2 marksman raised a hand. You're saying you feel it? I'm saying you watch it, like reading lips through a window. Another sniper, Israeli Sarah Mackle, leaned forward. And you learned this where? My father's porch, she said, before I ever touched a rifle. He made me sit in silence and tell him where the wind wasn't. That's how you learn where it is. The room fell into reflective quiet. Then came the voice behind her, deep, authoritative, unannounced. Captain Monroe. She turned. The Secretary of Defense stood at the rear of the room. Flanked by 2 JSOC aides, every operator stood at attention. "At ease," the secretary said. Approaching, he looked over the display, nodded, then met her eyes. "The president sends his regards and a personal request." Kayla's brow lifted. "Sir, the international competition begins next week. You've been selected to lead the U.S. long-range team. You won't just be competing. You'll be representing not only our skill, but our evolution." She nodded. "Understood, sir." But the secretary wasn't done. "One more thing," he said. "We're establishing a new doctrine inside JSOC, a blend of technological precision and human instinct. We're calling it hybrid marksmanship theory." He turned to the gathered operators. "And you're all looking at its author." Gasps were held, but not released. Kayla didn't flinch because something deeper was stirring in her now. Not pride, but responsibility. This wasn't about proving herself anymore. It was about redefining the standard. That evening, she stood alone on Range 14 at dusk. The sky stretched soft and orange, shadows folding along the trees. She set up her old rifle, not the fancy MK-22, not the SmartScope prototype, just her M110. No tech, no assistance. She wasn't practicing. She was remembering. The first time she felt a crosswind kiss her cheek and knew which way the bullet would drift. The first time she saw a flicker in heat shimmer and knew when to wait. She squeezed one round at 1,200 meters. It hit the bullseye like it had always been there. Behind her, quiet footsteps approached. It was Wheeler, the seasoned sniper from Task Force Sierra who had once doubted her. "I had a feeling you'd be here," he said, watching the sun dip. "They're calling your Sierra shot the Whisper. You know that." "I didn't, because you didn't speak, you didn't argue, you just pulled the trigger and rewrote the rules." Kayla glanced at him. "You ever miss being doubted?" she asked, voice half a smile. He smirked. "Not really, but I do miss watching the look on people's faces after you prove them wrong." They stood together in silence for a while. No rank, no pressure, just 2 shooters, just sky, wind, and memory. Then Wheeler added something softer. "I've seen the best, and I've never seen anyone do what you do. Your father. He'd be more than proud. He'd be changed by you." Kayla didn't answer. She just nodded once and loaded another round. Because some legacy doesn't live in names or medals. It lives in moments like this, when the wind stops and the world holds its breath. Why was her phone buzzing just moments before another impossible shot? The wind howled along the icy ridge of a classified location in northern Europe. Snow fell sideways in slanted sheets. Visibility was down to seconds, but Captain Kayla Monroe lay prone, perfectly still, her breath steady despite the storm. She was no longer the girl they mocked for holding a sniper rifle. She was now the U.S. team lead at the International Special Operations Competition, a silent war of skill between the world's elite, and in the final round, they had thrown in a curveball, one shot. Target, 2,900 meters. Conditions, crosswind, ice, elevation, low visibility. No computers allowed, only instinct, only nerve, only breath. She was ready, until her phone vibrated softly beneath her tactical jacket. Not a call, a message. She tapped once and saw the sender. Private Jennifer Collins. Kayla opened it, a short video clip, grainy. Someone had filmed from behind a training bunker. The voice on screen. "Watch this. Collins is about to try the Monroe shot." The round fired, a puff of dust, then cheering. The message below. "First hit at 2,000. I still have a long way to go, but you lit the way. Thank you, ma'am." Kayla's fingers tightened on the stock. She looked up at the frozen terrain, the swirling snow, the dancing mist, and saw everything. The rhythm, the hesitation, the drift. She saw her father's face in the clouds and felt his voice in her spine. "Trust your silence." She fired. The round vanished into white. Seconds passed, then came the alert. Direct hit. the announcer said. Something over the coms, but she didn't hear it. She exhaled slowly and stood, brushing frost from her sleeves. Behind her, the international team stood silent, a moment of disbelief, and then, slowly, applause. Even the Israeli sniper who'd refused to speak English all week muttered a single word. Legend. Kayla walked off the line without looking back because she didn't need to see it. She'd felt it back in the States. A ceremony followed, another award, another ranking. But Kayla said few words. What she cared about most wasn't the headlines or ribbons. It was the quiet changes, the ones happening in the shadows, the inboxes of young women asking for win charts, the MU instructors who'd rewritten their course material using her methods, and the newly named Timothy Monroe Precision Facility at Sierra Run, where a framed photo now hung on the wall. A girl in dusty fatigues, holding a sniper rifle, her eyes locked on a distant target. Calm, steady, unshakable. The caption beneath. She wasn't supposed to take the shot, but then she did, and everything changed. Late one evening, Kayla returned to her quarters after training rotations. The hallway was empty, the base quiet, but inside her room, a new wooden box sat on her bunk. No note, no markings, just her name engraved in the lid. She opened it. Inside, a single spent casing, polished, labeled in black ink. Sierra Run minus 2,950 meters. The shot that spoke louder than orders. And beneath it, her father's dog tags, cleaned, framed in velvet. Returned from Fort Carson archives without request. She didn't cry. Not because she wasn't moved, but because the emotion was no longer pain. It was peace. That night, she stepped outside and looked up at the stars again. Same sky as always. Same quiet hum of wind across steel and silence. And she thought of every girl out there, somewhere in some small town, holding a borrowed rifle and wondering if she belonged in a world built to doubt her. She hoped her story would reach them, not the medals, not the rank, just the truth. That dignity doesn't raise its voice. It just shows up, holds the line, and lands the shot no one thought it could. That was intense. But there's more where that came from. Click now to see how another underestimated soldier shattered every expectation with just one command.